Hello, welcome back to another episode of Math with Haas. You are watching Precalculus Season 1, Episode 17, and then this is our third video as part of Episode 13. This is like Part 3. So we are continuing looking at implementing exponentials and logarithms into Google Sheets. So what we have here, we're going to build off exactly where we left off last time. So we looked at last time four equations or four models with logarithms, and we noticed that they all had a coefficient in common. They all had a reference, or I should say an intensity or a measured concentration. Then they all had a reference. So we have a reference intensity for decibel, the Richter scale. We had a reference intensity. Decibel scale was 10 to the negative 12. Richter scale was 10 to the negative 4. The moment magnitude scale was 10 to the 16th. The pH scale, it didn't have one. So we think of it as a 1 just hiding out there, or 10 to the 0. In general, we could say that for all four of these models, you had a coefficient times log of a intensity divided by some reference value. And so we can, I don't know, we'll just put some dummy values in here. I don't know, we'll just put a 1. So actually, we should make a negative 1. Let's see what this would give us for pH, for example. So pH coefficient was -1. Our reference would be a 1. So that would be a very, very intense concentration of hydrogen ions, right? So this value here would correspond to the molarity of the concentration of hydrogen ions. So let's see here. We need the coefficient times log of intensity divided by reference, close parenthesis, enter. Yeah, see there we broke it. Goes. Yeah, interesting. Let's change this to equals, how about 10 to the negative 3. Pick a more realistic value. There, no longer broken. In fact, we get a pH of 3 here. Alright, so that was our function. Now, we talked about how we could change the values here, right? So we have set values for our coefficients here, and we have set values for our intensities. So instead of having to type those in all the time, there's a way we could make our lives easier to develop this function better. And one way of doing that is using a switch. Okay. So what a switch says is, so you have a switch, and then imagine you run through a bunch of cases. So you'll have, so what it will do is it will look at a range of values. So for example, this would be a range of values I highlighted. So it would, whatever cell you're putting this equation in, it would tell you, give it a range to look at, and it's going to look for our numbers. And so you have these different cases, case 1, case 2, so on and so forth. And then what you want to check, so case 1, say you want to check, like, say the number 1 is there, or check see if there's a number 2. It could be something like a A or a B. And then if it does match that case, then you tell it to give out value. So like you could tell it to give out a value like pie or cake or something. The notation this uses, here's our Google documentation here. So you can see if you want to plug it in, sample usage switch, then right here is the range. Then this would be case 1. You're checking to see if there's zeros. If there's a 0, it would output a no. If there is a 1 on your hand, output an other. So you can see here's what this switch looks like, and then you can see what this gives out. So this is what we're going to do. Now we got 4 functions here, right? So I'm just going to number these 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So, and then for each function, we can notice that the coefficient and the intensity, or the reference intensity here, or reference threshold, that changes depending on which function is, right? So coefficient's either 10, a 1, a 2/3, or a -1, depending if you have the whichever you have, or the reference here, right? 10, -12, 10, -4, these all change. So I'm going to delete this, and we're going to delete this. We'll ignore that. It gives, nice thing about Google Sheets, it gives you an error. So I have my cursor over and it says, oh, we're dividing by 0. That should make sense since we don't have any values in here. If you have a cell that's blank, Google Sheets will automatically just assign it a value of 0 since nothing's in there. So what we'll do is say, let's see, let's go ahead and explain what we're going to do. Type it out. Cases. So case 1 is going to be the decibel scale. Case 2 is going to be, let's see, it says Richter scale. Richter scale. Case 3, moment magnitude scale. Case 4, the pH scale. Alright, so what we're going to do is say, how about in this box right here, we're going to conditional format this. So this is going to be the box we want to put numbers in. So let's say 1. Okay. So put selection and box below. So what we're saying is, if we have these 4 cases here, you want to put those numbers like 1 through 4 in right here. So this could be 2, 3, 4. And then what we're going to do here is we want to enter our equation by hitting enter or the equal sign. So we're not in the equation, we want a switch. Now what we want to do is test, this is cell B, or column B, row 6, so we want to test B6. So our switch is going to look at this one cell right here, and then what we want to do is when it's case 1, we're working on the coefficients. Our coefficient is 10, so when it's case 1, this cell A2 is going to take on a value of 10. Case 2, it's going to take on a value of 1. Case 3, it's going to take on a value of 2/3. And case 4, we're going to take on a value of -1. And then we want to close parentheses, hit enter. So notice I have a 4 in here, -1. If we put a 1 in here, it's a 10. 2, 1, 3, there's our 2/3. Alright, so far that's looking good. Now for our reference, we're gonna hit equals. We want to put in a switch. And then now when we look at this, we want to use these values here. So when it's case 1, before we do case 1, we need to tell it to refer to this cell here. You can just click on the cell, or you can type it. I just click right here, and that's how I got the B6 in there. So case 1, we want 10 to the -12. Case 2, we want 10 to the -4. Case 3 is the moment magnitude scale, so we want 10 to the 16. And then case 4, we're just going to put in that 1. Alright, close parentheses, hit enter. See, we're on case 3 here, so that is a 10 to the 16. So we got 10 to the 16. Let's check. If I put a 1 in, reference is 0. Now, if you remember, it should say 0, not because it's actually 0, but because the display is rounded. You see, there's a set number of values that Google will display as a small decimal before I just say, you know, this is pretty much 0, so we'll just display 0. Don't worry, that 10 to negative 12 is still there. We could change the formatting if we wanted to, include more decimals, and we would be able to see what that decimal value is. So I'm not going to worry about that. If we plug a 2 in, I get my 0.001 or 0.0001. I don't know if I said 2 zeros or 3 zeros. And if we put in a 4, you get a 1. Alright, so now we're good to go. Right? So notice, maybe I should make this red, like do not edit. Right? Default, make this red. Do not edit this one. Now, cool thing is, if you hit Control Y, didn't work here. Normally, if you do Control Y or redo, that would, if you do Control Y, that would like redo. So if you did some sort of edit, it would repeat it, but for some reason it didn't do that here. So we'll just have to find it. So format, there we go, hit done. So I'm putting those in red, because that way I can remember, well, I have a switch here, I do not want to change that. So notice now if we wanted to look at the decibel scale and where the measured intensity was 10 to the negative 3 here, right? I just put a 1 in for decibel scale, and that's how many decibels it would be. Pretty cool. And if we want to switch to the Richter scale, right? Put a 2 in here, Richter scale. So if I measure if we measure the intensity of 0.001, our magnitude is a 1.0. That's almost laughable. We could change this around. Make this, how about 4 times? How about 10 to the 5th? There we go. That would be a 9.6 on a Richter scale. And if we want to change it to moment magnitude, so 3. Notice we have a negative number here. That's because this is not big enough value. That's because our reference value is 10 to the 16. So if we pick something like, suppose we have 10 to the 50 right now. Well, that wouldn't be a very realistic earthquake, a magnitude 23. So maybe I picked too high of a coefficient for demonstrating. So let's just pick about 17, right? So on the moment magnitude scale, if you measure the intensity of 4 times 10, 17, you would only have a magnitude of 1.07 approximately. So we'll just play around, see what different intensities give you. So 10, if it was 10 to the 30, notice it's now 9.7. That is one nice thing about having a setup like this, right? If I change this now to pH scale, we need now much smaller values, so let's say 10 to the negative 30. pH 29. I don't even know if that's possible. That's a very, very basic solution. We'll let the chemist answer whether that's possible. Okay, so here's 4 times 10 negative 10, pH 9.4. Still basic. But anyways, you can see here how having this switch in place really helps out, because now instead of having to type in these two values for the different functions, we have it built in using the cases. So you just put in 1 through 4 and it will adjust that. And in theory, if you had more logarithmic scales besides these 4, you can just keep adding cases and keep extending this. So there we are. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and supporting us on Patreon. We appreciate your viewership, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you for joining the math party, and we will continue looking at Google Sheets. All right. See you next time.